Hello, writerly friends. It is a crisp new year, and I was thinking, I bet there are several writers out there who are gearing up to query their novels. Well, I have got you covered. My name is Elizabeth, and I have put together a list of 5 tips on how to get a literary agent to request to read the rest of your manuscript fast. So I have queried 5 novels over the last decade or so, and I have boiled the query process down to a science. I'm still working on getting an agent, but that's just neither here nor there. I do know how to get a literary agent to request to read the rest of your manuscript, and I know how to get those requests to start coming in fast. The first few novels I queried, I got almost no requests, fast or slow. So then I spent a significant amount of time really studying the querying process in order to increase my request rate, and I think I have figured it out. Querying is a delicate art. It's more like a dance, really. A sort of choreographed flailing that you hope ends up looking alright in the end. But my current dance steps have been working. My most recent novel that I have been querying has gotten over 20 requests from literary agents to read the rest of the manuscript. That could be you! None of those agents ever offered to represent the book, but the rest of the book, that's just up to you, I can't help you with that. But the initial request, I can help you with. So, important note, this is just a list on how to get literary agents to request to read more of your manuscript. It is not a list on how to get them to offer representation. If I knew how to do that, I would tell you, but I don't, so I won't. Here we go. Tip number 1. Master the art of the one-line pitch. Now you might be like, oh well, slow down there. I thought we were mastering the art of the query letter. How many arts do I need to master for this thing? And, well, a lot. But the one-line pitch is probably the most important part of your query, and it is likely that you are doing it wrong. Unless you're already getting a ton of requests to read the rest of your manuscript. But then what are you doing here? Go watch something else. So, for many years, I thought my one-line pitch needed to pack as much information as possible into a single sentence. I would use commas and semicolons and that long little dash thing that writers love, and I would pile my pitch with as many of those little things as possible, while still being grammatically recognizable as a sentence. I mean, it was really a paragraph in disguise, but who cares? You know who cares? Literary agents. They do not want a paragraph in disguise. They want one line, a pitch, a hook. It is not a gist. You're not trying to sum up what happens in your story in as little words as possible. That's not what it is. You're trying to entice someone to read your book by writing an intriguing little sentence that makes them think, I gotta know more about that. Focus on conflict and unanswered questions in your hook. Everyone loves a mystery, and that's how you pique someone's interest every time. No matter what you are writing, put a little mystery into your pitch. That will get them into it. Interesting. Tip number 2. Your query letter should only cover your book up to the inciting incident. You don't want or need to write a query letter that goes all the way to the climax of your book. Most people recognize that a query letter will not tell the end of the book because you are trying to entice someone to read the rest of your novel. But if you go all the way to the climax, that's covering way too much of your novel. The climax of your novel is not the hook that you are trying to use to reel someone in to read the rest of your book. That will be a letdown for all your future readers, literary agents included. No one likes to read an engaging plot synopsis on the back of a book, only to find out that it actually covers the entire events of the novel up to the very, very end. Because then when you're reading the book, you will already know everything that's going to happen. The whole book ends up feeling like backstory. Because you're reading it and you're like, when are we going to get to that juicy hook that I read about on the back of the book? And that won't come until the very, very end, and then you'll be disappointed. Your readers will be like, I know all of this. I read the summary on the back of the book. Let's get to the good stuff. And then the good stuff is just in the last 20 pages. That is a surefire way to frustrate your readers and to have them lose faith in you as a writer. So, only divulge the plot of your book up to and including the inciting incident. Not the result of the inciting incident, just what the inciting incident will be. That will hook people. Everything after that will be a surprise. They'll be like, yes, this is the meaty goodness of the book. If you include all of that into the query letter, then they'll be like, this is all backstory. When are we going to get to the meaty goodness of the book? Jeez. Also, if you do write a query letter that includes all the events of your book up to the climax, it is very likely that your query letter is either way too long, includes way too much information, or is not nearly focused enough to be engaging. Your query letter should pretty much just be character, stakes, and the necessary choice that the character will have to make at the inciting incident in order for the story to begin, to get to the meaty goodness. The meaty goodness is what will be piquing your reader's interest and hooking them into your novel. The meaty goodness is not the climax. The inciting incident is where you want to focus the energy of your query, not the climax. Tip number 3, send 5 or 6 queries at a time. Usually people say to send 2 or 3 queries at a time, and if you are the master of self-control, then you go right ahead and do that. But I have never found that to be a realistic number. Once I start sending queries, I get like trigger happy and start launching them into the ether, like a mascot shooting t-shirts into the crowd at a minor league baseball game. It's not great. You see, the reason you're only supposed to send a few queries at a time is to gauge the response rate before sending queries to every agent on your list. Because if your query letter isn't effective, you want to know that after only contacting a couple of agents. Not, like 20. There's only so many literary agents out there. You don't want to ruin your chances by sending your first, fairly weak attempt at a query letter to every single one. But I have found that 5 or 6 is the sweet spot to fulfill your need to send everything all at once, while also being realistic and not actually sending a query letter to every agent on Earth. It's just something to think about. Tip number 4, your first 10 pages of your manuscript should be the best 10 pages of your manuscript. But that doesn't mean you spend more time on them than you spend revising the rest of the book. That is not what that means. People always think that's what that means, and it is not what that means. It means you spend the same amount of time revising the rest of the novel as you do revising the first 10 pages. But the opening 10 pages are the most intriguing. You want them filled with the most reasons to keep people reading. Get them to ask questions, to want them to know what happens. That needs to be in the first 10 pages. I know this isn't a list about what to do after agents request to read the rest of your manuscript. That is just all up to you. But a lot of writers focus so much on the first 10 pages that they neglect the rest of the book. So then those first 10 pages are great, and everything else isn't. Don't do that. That will never lead to an agent offering to represent you. Not that I know. You want to make sure that you spend the same amount of energy poring over the rest of your book as you do the first 10 pages. But you just want to focus on intrigue, stakes, character, and conflict in those first 10 pages. Not setting, backstory, description, or internal narrative. There are places for that later in a book. Definitely. All the things. They can be everywhere in the book. But not in the first 10 pages. Not if you want to reel in that literary agent. I don't actually know how to fish, so I'm just making it up. Tip number 5. Use Query Tracker to find fast responding agents. This is the big one. In order to get fast responses from agents, you need to know which agents are fast responders. Then you need to send them your carefully crafted query letter and wait for the requests to pour in. So make an account on querytracker.com.org. Oh dear, I should have looked it up. I'm not sure if it's .com. Oh dear, I'll write it too. You don't need to pay for your account. You can, but I never have. The paid version gives you access to a lot more individual insights on all of the literary agents out there. But even with a basic free account, you can see how quickly each agent responds to query letters on average, and then send your queries accordingly. Now, don't plan to only send queries to fast responding agents. That is a bad plan for many reasons, one of which being most people like to send their queries to the fast responders, which means they usually end up getting way more queries than people who have like a no response means no policy. And also, there are just some good agents out there who have a lot to do and cannot be fast responders to query agents, and that's fine, that's good, that's just fine. But we're talking about the fast responders, because that's how you know that you've got an engaging query, and then you know it fast. But you'll also want to query some no response means no's, and the I'll get back to you in 6 to 9 months agents. But in order to get your feet wet and test your query, send your first 5 queries to agents that respond within a week. You can find them on querytracker.org, .com, .net. Maybe it's .net. Then, if you've got an intriguing enough query, you'll get your first manuscript requests in the first week of querying. You probably still have an engaging query if you only get 1 request and 4 rejects, because a good request rate is typically around 20 to 30%. Nobody gets like 100% request rate unless you're like, President of the United States or something. If you don't get any requests in your first 5 or 6, revise your query letter and repeat the process. It's sort of like whittling at this point. You revise your query and send it out to 3 or 4 more fast responders until you get a pretty steady request rate of 20 to 30%. Requesting to read more of your manuscript versus rejecting of 70 to 80%. That's just normal. That's just how art works, you know. There's a lot of opinion going on because, you know, it's art. You like some books, you don't like other books. So a 20 to 30% request rate. That's good. That's pretty good. Then you'll know that you have an effective query and can begin sending queries to agents who might not be so quick at the responding, but who you still feel could be a good fit for your book. And then voila. I mean, I don't know what happens next. I've never gotten an agent. The rest of your book has to be up to par, you know. There can't be anything wrong with the rest of your book. There's always something wrong with the rest of my book. But I have gotten requests to read more of my manuscript, and I've gotten them fast. And you know, that's something. I guess, you know, that's what this video is about.